Welcome back to Story Deep Dive with Rachel and Dana. This is a podcast where two book coaches, editors, and besties discuss books not as readers but as writers to draw inspiration from great books and have plenty of laughs along the way, if for no other reason than I am constantly goofing around on camera and collecting material for the bloopers. So this week we are talking about our editor's takeaways for Tempt Me at Twilight by Lisa Kleypas. But before we do that, we like to give you guys a little heads up, a little sneak preview of what's coming down the pipeline. And I think we've got something kind of juicy coming up. I don't know, maybe no one's talking about this anymore, but we have our next book pick for the month of June. Yeah, it'll be June. Dana, do you want to tell the people what it is?
Do I tell them?
Yeah, it's a Dana pick.
That's a Dana pick.
It's technically a crossover, but our crossover picks have been historically picked by you.
Are you serious? Oh, maybe
Yes.
it's because I just I didn't know that's what happened. What happened was, so our book is going to be A Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. And I think I'm going to stop trying to predict whether Rachel's going to like something or not. I feel like it is what it is. However, no, this book I think is super popular for various reasons. I found this book when I was doing just research on books that sort of rose to the surface when you talk about romantasy.
Mm-hmm.
As someone who has worked with clients that I would have said had a romantic fantasy or a fantasy romance,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of smashing it together, it has been interesting to see this niche evolve.
Yeah.
Because I have found that it's either people who write fantasy that's throwing in a romance or people who write romance that's throwing in the fantasy, and it feels like that.
Yeah.
But this particular book, we read it in our book club, and I would say like 95% of the people went on to read other books, like continued and enjoyed it, like it was even
went on to read the next book in the
Next
series.
one.
The way you
Yeah.
said read other books sounded like they passed
they
after
let
it.
it
I
go.
was like, whoa.
My bad. No, like they kept reading.
Yeah.
And I personally liked it when I didn't know if I would, because
Yeah.
I personally don't like books where the protagonists are young.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm grown. I know that
Like,
there's
I'm too
some
old for this
adults-
shit.
I was gonna say it like that, but it might represent how I felt. But it kept coming up. And so that was one reason why I thought I wouldn't. I cannot say that I am personally a huge fan of dragon books. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But I don't have any that are just like at the top of the list.
Yeah.
So a lot of the ones that I end up doing is because they are picks for the client, and I read them. So I mean, I read a lot of, but I just personally like some of the books that I picked. Those are books that I would pick to read, you know? So there's that. I also think that I'm always curious, because I would say that I have fantasy clients and you have fantasy clients, but you probably have more as far as if we like the quantity that are like fantasy.
Yeah.
And I have a
hardcore.
handful that are fantasy. And
Yeah.
mine are more on the paranormal romance, a romantic fantasy blend.
Yeah.
And so I think it's always interesting when I think this probably falls closer in line with my client lineup, but I think most people, when they think of romantasy, think of this book. So it's always interesting to see when you look at it, who like the fantasy. I would say that it probably is more along the way fantasy would be defined by our old mentor. I'll say it that way, where it's just situational, like the world, but it's not like Mistborn or something. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So now there were a lot of things that I feel like it does well. I'm looking forward to reading it again because I've only read it once, and I am planning to try my absolute best to get to book 2 so I
Mhm.
can see sort of how it sort of pans out. But
Yeah.
overall, it was very enjoyable. It's one of those that I kept trying to get back to continue, and
Mhm.
I always find that as a good sign, being
Yeah.
that in the beginning, because it took me a minute to get into it
Yeah.
in the beginning, because I'm like, oh Lord, it's, you know, these are kids, and
Yeah, we
but
got
they're
20
like,
year olds.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then I'm not gonna lie, there were some nods to things that I thought, oh, this is interesting.
Mhm.
And listen, it wasn't dragons, but one of my favorite movies as a kid was Never Ending Story.
Mm.
That was one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. It gave me that sort of nostalgic
Mm.
feel. Of girl, I don't even know. I guess it was a flying dog. I don't know what he was supposed to be. I don't know what he was supposed to be in,
Just
but
dragon adjacent.
girl, and it was a big old puppet because
Yeah.
special
Oh,
effects
yeah.
were atrocious. So I feel as though I can understand why people like it. I do feel like there are some lines where I'm like, because I do feel like the steamy scenes was like, okay.
Mhm.
But yeah. So with that said, y'all, I think overall it's a book that people like. I think it's gonna be interesting to see what we see as editors, what we
Yeah.
see as opportunities that writers could get even more from reading this story.
Mhm.
And overall, it is a great audiobook read.
Yeah.
I'll say that. Now again, I feel like I will read it again, and I think I'm just waiting for her to, I don't like getting into it too deep if I don't know what you're doing on the back
Unfinished
end.
series. Yeah.
So, because I was like, I think I would really want to read it and get the physical copy and kind of go through and mark it up and kind of thing.
Mhm.
So we shall see. I don't know what I think you'll do. Overall, it will be an experience. It will be fruitful to, working with your clients. And I think for readers who have read it before, maybe there can be some takeaways for the development of the characters, the development of the world. It is a book one that it
Mhm.
looks like at least it's going to
At
have
least 3.
3 to 5 books, I think.
Whew.
I think.
3 to
I think
5. Hot
so.
dog.
I could be wrong. But that's why I want to read 2 to feel like,
Yeah.
okay, are we getting closer to closing it down? Because let me tell you something. I think these people, when they start realizing it's popular, they drag their feet because it's like, okay, can I stretch this?
Yeah.
And that's when I'm like, I'm out.
Dana's gonna.
Throw up the Baptist finger.
Yes, ma'am.
So
So
yeah.
I want to say though, like, because the thing is like, and it's interesting too, because you worked with romantic fantasy before romantasy was
Exactly.
a word that people were using, right?
Right.
And so what I think is interesting, and I think that there's some really important conversation. I say important, maybe that's like overselling it, but there's some really useful conversations to have here when we're talking about genre and expectations, right? And like the way that you, first of all, knowing what you are setting out to do and knowing what kind of reader you're setting out to attract and what the promise is and what, right? Like, because romantasy has gotten mixed up in all kinds of like conversations that sometimes are like, that almost feel like that's not relevant. Like, this is not what this is not what people are asking romantasy to do, right? And so you will get some criticisms or some perspectives that are like, nobody was asking romantasy to be any of these things, right? But also like you have this development of this genre where, so like from your perspective, there are certain elements that maybe are not as fully developed in terms of like the romance and like how romance, like almost like the romance playbook, right? And it sort of, so what happens is you have a genre that existed before romantasy when it was just romantic fantasy, but then something kind of like, you have sort of like a breakout book that like takes off and then takes the genre in a new direction. and it becomes something very different. Even from, like, if you look at like Sin and Chocolate, right? Now that's more, again, paranormal, but it feels sort of more like romantic fantasy almost to me, because of just how
The
much,
world building.
yeah, like how
And I love
much
that.
it's layered in, even though it's sort of more like urban. Um, but like, and so the way that it sort of, it starts to kind of have its own genre conventions that don't really fit into
To,
romance or fantasy, and it's kind of its own thing. And that, so, but the thing is like, number one, if you were introduced to reading and romance in the context of romantasy, right, that's where you're, that's like normal, right? You're like, oh yeah, this is like, this is what it is. But for people who maybe are more like, who have been historically more like been romance readers prior to this, or fantasy readers prior to this, it may not land, like that might be why you have some of that pushback on it as well, because it's defying the rules for people who are established in genres, who just are already established in those rules and expectations. And this has kind of taken on a life of its own and become something else, which is, I think, how you wind up as well with something that feels this divisive. Because you have basically, I see two takes on Fourth Wing: the most amazing book that was ever written, and anybody who doesn't like it doesn't understand, and the worst book ever written, and whoever does it, or whoever does like it, doesn't understand, right? Like it's literally like that level of like, there's only one place you can land. And I think it has a lot to do with that it's like, it's combining established genres that have established readerships, but doing kind of its own thing and breaking a lot of those rules and or expectations. And so, again, if you're coming in for the first time and that's your experience, that's like, this is what books do, this is normal. Versus if you're like, hey, that's not how this is supposed to go, and you feel that there's a dissonance. And I suspect that that's why
yeah.
a book like that winds up being very, again, just people are one or the other, really love it or really hate it.
Yeah, I have a strong theory on that. And I would totally agree with you. I think here it will be interesting to see how we feel about it. I agree with you though. I think it's the fact that it hit a mainstream audience.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of people, it was one of the first times that
Yeah.
they did something like that. And it leaned more into the sort of originality, sort of novelty of fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
But you also are saying that this is a romance. It is still the first, like, it is a you know what I'm saying? Like,
There's one part at the forefront, and it's
exactly.
romantasy.
Right out the gate.
It's on
Right out the
it.
gate. So
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I also feel like it could be that it's a part of a wave that, because a lot of things that were booming on stuff like book talk and things like that, that it sort of caused certain books that are to really blow up, that were
Mm-hmm.
very unique. And it will be interesting to see how well they hold over time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think overall, I enjoyed it. I mean, I finished it. I didn't have any.
Whoa, low bar. Hang on, that was not a sale. Well, I finished
Oh
it. When you told us that you
No.
did it for a book club, you had to finish it.
I did. I did have to finish it. I did have to finish it. But I would have finished it. I would have finished
Yeah.
it. I always love when there's a story that I'm listening to that every time I get a chance, I'm pushing play. That's a
Yeah.
good sign.
Yeah, that's great.
And I cared about what was going on in the States. And it always makes me so fascinated when I see the influences of certain books. And
Mhm.
because I haven't read those books, I don't know how much it is, but I know you can tell it influenced it.
Yeah.
And like, for example, right now, well, not when this goes live, but while we're recording, we just finished reading Taken by Fate. And they had something called Harvest Games that reminded me of Hunger Games,
Yeah.
right? Of like taking people and they're going up against each other. And if you win, you get this sort of specialized treatment in this vampire society. as a human that's being sort of like forced in.
Yeah.
And now we're gonna eventually we're gonna finish the trilogy, so I can see how it goes. But the point is, so it sort of has like a lot of the book series that came out around that time sort
Yeah.
of influenced a lot of things. And so I just think overall it's always interesting as someone who works in this space. The reality is your client is the one that picks who their comps and the direction that they want to take it in.
Yeah.
My job is to help them to do the absolute best that they can in that space based
Yep.
on their skill set and what their outcomes or their goals are. And so it means that we're going to be doing books that are popular now and may not be popular later. And
Yeah.
it's just, it's just how it goes. And
Yeah.
so the great thing is that it was enjoyable, and I'm looking forward to, reading book 2 to see, and hopefully hearing sooner than later if it's going to be 3 books or 4 books.
Really quick, because I don't actually know off the top of my head. Did this start as indie and then get picked up by Trad, or was it originally Trad?
I don't know, because it's really not my thing. I think it was by one of the not smaller. I think was traditionally published, but by like a smaller one. I don't think it's like a big 4 kind of one.
Gotcha.
Let me see.
Okay, I'll look into it in time for the overview, because that's just one of those things that I was curious about. Because right now, this has always been true, but right now, something that's happening like a lot is indie authors getting picked up by Trad. So they have something that they published indie, and whether they pick up the author for, and they find a decent following, and either they pick up the author for a new book or they like revise their successful indie and like put it out with usually a new title, and like they kind of like give it like a little bit of like a refresh, and then traditionally publish it. That's been happening. Again, they've been
doing that for forever. Yeah,
that's always been happening, but I'm noticing it happen in a new, like it's almost like having another big wave of this happening right now.
Yeah, because the way that it's happening now, this has always happened, but it's a resurgence. Well, before, because somebody been doing this over 20 years, what happened is if you had released it indie first, they didn't want to touch it.
Yeah.
Right. And then you went to a place where, okay, if it was indie and it did okay and they picked it up, you had to remove it and give them rights.
Right.
So that you were selling them rights.
Right.
Then for a while, it became, okay, the person was a hybrid author. You gave them the rights to this series. They could still do some other things. Now what I'm seeing is the fact of you just have people where they are now realizing what they have as an independent author, and they only sell partial rights. So they're only selling paperback so that they can get into. So you look at people like Anna Wang. You see it with like I've seen, I believe some like Nicole. There's a lot of the bigger romance where they're being picked up, but they're being picked up for paperback,
for like limited rights,
right? Just for that one thing, so that they can keep everything on the ebook side. Because before it couldn't go that way. They wanted the ebook rights, and then so now because they have following, and I'm seeing that the ebook version of this, I mean, this was done by Entangled. Entangled is a nice size publisher. Yeah, and it looks like they have all of the rights. So they published it for all versions of the book. It's a great thing to see. And I think, and if I'm not mistaken, I think Entangled had a special deal with Amazon because it's still in Kindle Unlimited. So, but I know. So this is what makes me think that it was maybe some sort of special deal, because I know it's in book, major bookstores, but you can do that if you have paperback. I don't know whether ebook it is, but the point is, I mean, it just shows there's options out there.
Yeah, for sure. And that's like one thing that, like, because I've been seeing a lot of indie books that are getting picked up and then either limited rights or whatever. Because again, publishers are like, oh, you have a following. Like, we're like, want to get in on that. And so, so I wasn't sure if this was one of those because it was such a runaway success. I didn't know if they ended up like if she got an independent following or if it was like traditionally published and then it was just one of those books that like that just blew up, you know? So stay tuned, everybody, because next week we're going to start talking about Fourth Wing. And I think we've got a really, like I said, a great discussion on just romantasy as a genre and helping position expectations and genre and what to do with that information. So really looking forward to having that conversation next week. But first, we got to talk takeaways from Tempt Me at Twilight by Lisa Kleypas, which I'm really excited to just kind of round out our discussion and get our takeaways and kind of pull that good stuff to the surface to really like take with us in our writing as we go forward. So before we do that, do you want to hit us with a summary real quick?
Tempt Me at Twilight follows Poppy Hathaway, a young woman who longs for a quiet, respectful life and believes she's found it with the perfect, well-mannered suitor. But everything changes when Harry Rutledge, a powerful and unconventional hotel owner, becomes determined to have her for himself. After a scandal forces Poppy into an unexpected marriage, she finds her carefully planned future turned upside down. As she adjusts to life with a man who is as captivating as he is dangerous, Poppy must decide whether to hold on to the life she thought she wanted or risk everything for the love she never saw coming.
Awesome. Okay. So what are your like high level main topics that you want to talk about of like what writers should really look to this book for specifically?
Mm-hmm. I think we talk about a whole lot of stuff over these episodes. And so I did sort of just look at this from the lens of things that I think this book does really well. Like if you wanted to go back and be like me, love to reread this story. Uh, so the first thing is I think that this is a great book at studying familiar tropes that are executed in a really great way, whether it's doing it a little bit different, turning it on its head. As we'll talk about, like that really was a driving force for moving the story forward. Also, to look at having a morally ambiguous main male character inside of a reader safe sort of expectations sort of book
Yeah.
without being dark, right?
Yeah.
Because this wasn't like a dark romance. And this book is older. So having what now, if you saw a morally gray character, you would normally see it in a dark romance or even a light mafia or something like that. So seeing it in this context without turning the whole book sort of into a dark romance, this is another great way so that you can have someone that I always think of them like sort of have some edges to them,
Yeah.
but bring something really significant, to the story.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I have is to see how a delayed relationship development can still feel engaging. This story, I don't know if I would classify it as a slow burn, but it sort of feels like that because
Yeah.
they really don't fully consummate the relationship until later into the story.
Yeah.
And so it's really because they are aiming to sort of grow and get over the sort of hiccups that they have earlier in the relationship, but it's still engaging. It keeps you glued to the page and you believe that there is chemistry there, even though they're trying to figure out what are we going to do about it.
Yeah.
Or at least she is. I don't think he's figuring it out.
I don't think he's worried about that at all. He's got this. He knows what he wants. He knows what he's about.
Listen. And then the final thing is to look at integrating series ensemble cast, like setting and future hooks without derailing the central romance. She did that so well. And she does that across this series. She does it really well. And I always like looking at this from a sense of having an integrated series, but you see that really well. And it also means that as you move forward, you are also seeing these characters continue to grow and
Yeah.
change as their relationship grows and time is
Yeah.
on their side. And so that's another thing that is really great about this book in within the context of this particular series. What
Yeah.
about you?
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. So, I just really want to highlight again, just kind of nesting my points on within yours, really utilizing all of your story decisions, right? Like when you make a choice about some facet of the world or some facet of your cast or whatever, and really like not just letting like making that decision and being like, all right, check, this is going to be this part of this thing and boop, but really like making the most out of those, right, and really letting them come to bear on the story. And then this one I think too is like a really good, this story is a great example of showing internal change like externalized, right, where we actually see it on the
Mhm.
page. And so really being intentional about the scenes that she chose to use or the specific events she chose to use, to showcase where the characters are in the process, who they're becoming, who they're capable of being, right, and really like utilizing those opportunities to demonstrate change and to show where they kind of are on their arc. And I think this story just does that really well.
Mhm.
So those are like my two big ones that I'll just kind of put inside of wherever they fit as we're having our conversation. But do you want to go ahead and start with, since this kind of pulls from plot anyway? Do you want to maybe start talking about the trope patterns at work in this story?
Mhm. Well, those familiar trope patterns, I have like a list, and there's so many here. There is found family, opposites attract, forced marriage or unexpected marriage, forced proximity, bad boy, good girl, fish out of water, a morally gray protagonist, touch her and die. Um, Also the fact that we had a scandal
Mhm.
that was sort of like what we saw in act 1. And really these are tropes that we've seen a million times. And here's the thing about romance, I feel like you're going to always say that.
Yeah.
I think so. And I don't think that's a bad thing. That's kind of where a lot of romance readers are coming in, like this is just their jam and they like it,
Hmm.
or they're looking forward to reading it. What I think she does really well here is she utilizes it in a way that you're going to talk about, right? But utilize it in a way to sort of move this story along, being that we didn't sort of have a lot of concrete external like plot to sort of lock in on. I mean, we talked about off camera about how, Poppy really didn't have a whole lot like going on. She
Yeah.
just was.
She's not like, trying to like accomplish something, or like she's not on the lam, she's not trying to escape Harry. Like it's not like, oh, forced marriage and then like trying to get like, she just, listen, she gets to try, I don't remember, what is it, like creme brulee, like she has a French chef making her the best food in the world. That's what Poppy has going on. And honestly, like if I could step into Poppy's shoes, I think I would. Like if that's all I had to have going on, I think I'd be like, yeah, all right, sign me up.
So I think, but what we're seeing here is like you see those tropes, you seeing them at work. You're seeing how she's using it to move the story along, and as I was saying a bit, keeping us engaged. And I think my biggest part of that is if you're someone that you are trying to grasp those tropes
Hmm.
and see how you could potentially write those tropes. I think that is another thing about having them sort of like slowed down and stretched out. It's almost
Yeah.
like it's laid out on a map a little bit for you.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's kind of what I feel about this. And I think that piggybacks really well on your note about those internal sort of progression being shown externally.
Yeah, yeah. What's interesting, and we really did. We were talking around this off camera, trying to like finesse the language because we
What's
talked
up?
about in plot that we were trying to work out like, okay, like there's not a lot of like plot contents, there's not an external goal for Poppy. She's sort of, but really what happens is like it's almost like the tropes are doing the heavy lifting of like the plot movement. which she handles really well, right? Like she really uses those tropes to like maximum effect to give us something happening so that it doesn't feel like we're stalling out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what she's able to do then is she like kind of utilizes the events that take place within the story. So we don't have a clear driving plot or a clear driving external goal, but she uses the events that sort of crop up along the way, inside the marriage, or I mean, the marriage being one of the things, the scandal, all these different things, to give, like, it basically forces Poppy to like change, right? Like it's giving her the opportunity to change. And then as she chooses to, right, claim that agency, to kind of take up space in the world, to kind of push back on Harry, right, it's like it's showcasing the person she's becoming. And the main thing that I think about here is like I'm always looking for the crossover between the external and the internal.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I'm thinking about writers, and when they're working out their internal arcs and their external arcs, like using the external stuff of the story to prompt the protagonist's change, right? Like what's going to uniquely challenge them, and taking advantage of every opportunity to require your protagonist to step up to the plate, to grow into the person they can be. And then like, because then when we see them doing that in action, it has resonance, it has like, it actually has an effect on us as a reader, because we're seeing it. It's not like, oh, I changed the way I think and like now I think differently, right? But they do differently. And Poppy, right, is it's so great because she sets us up with this image, right, of the rabbit charging the cat. um and Poppy is given multiple opportunities to do this, and she takes them, right? So we watch her go from sort of being sort of gentle and compliant to like really sort of owning, like, okay, I'm a grown up. Like, listen, I'm in this mess. I gotta come up with a solution. I need to do what I need to do. Or again, for Harry, you can have this, you can have this, you may not have this. And that's the thing, right? That also like prompts change in him, right? Getting that resistance from Poppy requires him to be better if he's going to get what it is that he really, really wants. And so it gives the opportunity then to show those things actually happening on the page. So Poppy is given opportunities to like to push back on Harry and to showcase the fact that she is growing and she's becoming sort of, again, sort of stronger, a little more direct. I'm sort of circling around the words of like the way that she sort of shows up, right? But again, it's really about kind of claiming that agency and taking up that space. And so I think this is a good example of like using whatever events you have in your story to showcase those things, right? And creating events that invite your protagonist to rise to the occasion, to be who they're actually capable of being, and letting the story actually, like letting the story give them that opportunity, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. It does. And I would say you see, I mean, this is story, right? Like, I mean, you see this, but one of the ways that I think it's done well here in this regard is the way that it's written as far as the internal decision making process.
Yeah.
And then her making decisions, because a lot of it is really pitted against her upbringing and her siblings' relationships,
Yeah.
and her determination to be ordinary.
Yeah.
And just to be regular. So everything that pops up that is just not ordinary and regular is like, wait a minute, what is going on here?
Yeah.
And so we do see that. Um, this makes me think also about, because we see it from Poppy, but we see it from Harry too.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are moments where he is thinking, okay, I already have her. I got this in the bag. And then it's like, oh, but brother, hold on.
Yeah.
She's a package deal.
Yeah.
There's that. Or she's just like, listen, I said I do. I did not say I do to this, this, and this. Or, or even her having to process his existence in the world and how he sort of has been almost isolated, but in a group of people.
Yeah.
And how she's like, how are you doing this? Like, how can you be around these people and not care about? He's like, I care for them. I take care of them. I pay them.
They get great paychecks. Are you kidding me?
Listen, she's just like, this sounds the same thing. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. But it is in his mind. So what you do is you see him. Even there was this one moment I think I wrote down, like I said one of them, which was my favorite. Like, he can have your heart as long as I have the rest of you. Listen, there was that.
We've never seen a more clear expression of a misunderstanding at work. Listen. Like where we're like, oh, I see where your growth point is there, buddy. You're showing.
Listen, he said, no, he was like a very clear at like, listen, baby, he said, fairy tales are for entertainment, not life guidance or something. Yeah. He told her. So you see that, and you see him changing, and he begins to see, I think this is probably just an aside. I always tell my students that, the biggest part of the transformation is about who they must become to have that person.
Yeah.
We know Harry wants her.
Yeah.
When she's in his curiosities room and he sees how much information she knows and how curious she is about what he's curious about, which is just, just kind of steals his words. He knows he wants her. He says that immediately. I want her. But to figure out how to not just have her in his world, but to have all of her.
Yeah.
In the way that he truly desires, the more he sees of her, the more he wants of her.
Yeah.
That becomes his journey of like, okay, I don't want to say I'm sorry, but if I gotta say I'm sorry, if I gotta say I'm sorry to get you to stop being over there and come over here, I'm gonna say I'm sorry, but I don't mean it, but I'm gonna say it. And I think this is one of those things that if you look at it really as a writer of like, how do I get my character from point A to point Z, and what are those progressions? And that's where your last point comes in beautifully. Right? It's like, how do I use these moments to show where they are where he is on that journey from, I want her and I'm going to do whatever I got to take, to, no, I don't just want her in my life. I don't want her to just have my name. I want all of her. I want her smiles. Yeah. I want her laughter. I want her meals. I want her curiosity. I want all of that.
Yeah.
So who does he have to be, and what does he have to set aside to make that happen? And I think that is what this story does really well, because you see when he's like, listen, to, okay, what? Because I'm not leaving, and if I leave, you coming with me. So what are we gonna do?
Yeah.
So I love it. So with that said, we get to see this morally gray. And he says it from the beginning. He does not tell a fib about that at all. Of making sure that she knows who he is before she enters into this arrangement. But it doesn't take the story for a darker turn. We get the laughs, we get the humor, we get the family dynamics, we get really great highs and lows. We get the misunderstandings. We get all of that. And I think it was done really, really well. And I think it will sort of piggyback on my next one before we go to your next one, which is that because of this misunderstanding, and the misunderstanding is like, he doesn't just want her to be there. He wants her to want to be there.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, you can't make me want what I didn't ask for.
Yeah.
Is what Poppy says. I think I'm Dana-lizing it, but this is essentially what she said. And so that difference becomes probably the sole source of their conflict.
Yeah.
And she manages to make that's squishy, y'all. That is about as squishy as you're gonna get, because there's no way for us to say other than she said yes, she said no, right?
Yeah.
There's no concrete nature to it, but she still kept it engaging without it feeling like it was a repeat of the
Yes.
same pushback. Try there. I guess what I'm really saying, it could have been more try fails at a higher level with better stakes, maybe a little bit, but it would have helped if we had the external part.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to say. So basically, she kept it engaging, she kept it entertaining, and we do see that in that delayed relationship. And we still are rooting for them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're still rooting for Poppy to go with Harry.
Yeah. Yeah, and those moments that we get where they come together and they're like, oh, this close, like those moments, right? Because I think she did a good job of like pacing those out where they start to come together and then whoosh, they come apart. And so
Yes.
what she did is, I think that in because again, this is like something we talked about, like off screen, right? Of like when you say, I want a braid, so we've got our external, we've got the romance, we've got the internal, and in this story we really just have the romance and the internal, right? So it's sort of like you're working with like 75% of the whole or whatever. But she made those two things do all, like, again, it meant that all those things had to do all of the work, which they did. And I think one of the things that made that work is she was able to maintain that tension of when we see them coming close together, it shows us how right they are, but then something comes in between us that shows us how far they still have to go.
Mm-hmm.
So that you still kind of have, almost like you still have a form of narrative drive going, even though you don't have that external plot like driving the thing forward, but she has that tension to kind of keep us like, oh, we almost got there, oh, we almost got there. So we keep sort of like pushing forward in the story because we see that they're so close and they're getting closer and closer, but they just keep bumping into that thing that still needs that change.
Mm-hmm. And what the reason why, when we talk about the braid in our framework of the addictive romance blueprint, it's because that external plot gives you so much that it sort of is like anchors in a story, right? It can give you time, it can give you the passage of time, it can give you understanding, like what are the mile markers, if you will, that is going to move the story forward, and you're able to work in between those points with a little bit more ease and specificity that you don't have when it's just all emotions, right? When it's just all emotions. And I think here, that's where we get to see the other characters and the other family members, which can kind of it's a lot. It was a lot. But I always chalk that up to this is an older book, and things that people did before just wouldn't fly now, and it's just how it is. But so not having that, but we see moments, like one of my favorite moments with them was the sandwich moment when she's like, sit down, and he's like, well, I gotta just eat your sandwiches. She tried to find the most boring part. I love that part so much. He said, oh, I think I know. I loved it. So no, yes, but I will say again, we're saying that it did it well for what we have, not as a concrete, like do it like that, like as a model. Did you want to add in your other
so
or did you want me to go on?
Why don't you go ahead and start by talking about our series Ensemble, and then I'll fit, since my point is in that realm, right, I'll fit it in there.
Okay. So the last one that I wanted to talk about is, like, this is a great, really, really great job of doing like an interconnected series. So here we have an ensemble cast. You have her sisters, spouses from books 1 and 2. You also have, we can already see the fact that we have the brother, and also their, I guess if they were younger, it would have been considered a governess. I can't remember what they consider Catherine.
Companion, I think, is what they call her.
Mm-hmm. And to teach them etiquette and
how to be civilized. Don't show your ankles. Stop it. Don't hike up your dress like an animal.
Listen, they need to give her a whole raise. So we see that. We also see setting from the Rutledge hotel will actually continue moving forward. You also see the family house, the family estate, that is also from previous books. And then you also have the future hooks, the Leo, Catherine,
Yeah.
and
I'm assuming
we had
Beatrice as well.
Beatrice. Yes, she had.
Yeah.
Well, Beatrice was done. Yes, Beatrice. Yes,
She gets one
and
right.
I feel like, I feel like when I feel like Beatrice has one, but I can't remember if Beatrice was one that was done as a short story.
Oh, okay.
And I actually have it. I
Mm.
have it. So we have that, but all without sort of derailing the romance. And we really, what I love most is the fact that there's this sort of continuation of story,
Yeah.
right? This feeling like this world resides when we
Yeah.
close the book. I
Oh,
love that. And
yeah.
the fact that they are sort of continuing and we get to catch up with Cam and Amelia and now
Yeah.
them having kids and Win and Maripin continuing, and it makes us even more curious about what happens next and to be
Yeah.
able to get that update. And that was done well. And I think that was another one of those parts of picking scenes and moments that allow us to move this story forward and get an understanding of sort of the undercurrent of some of those tropes that we were talking about. That found family was strong.
Yeah.
Cam, being at the head of this family after they kind of was floating, and Leo being Leo. And this was just done beautifully. I think it's also one of those things where what I absolutely love, which is planning your series and understanding who your core characters are and knowing what they're contributing and bringing towards this family. And we saw that all being aimed at Harry.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, like, I think if we're thinking about someone who's read the preceding books, like the satisfaction of like Harry's on some old shenanigans, and then to be like, what's Cam gonna do, right? What's the Mary Penn gonna do, right?
Listen.
And it gives like, and so it gives that, it adds for anyone who has read the book. So normally you read a series and you go book 1, book 2, book 3, and you do it in order. So if you have done that, you almost like you get like an extra reward because you get to see sort of the continuing story for these characters. But then also, right, we meet Harry and it's got us like, I can't wait to find out, right, what's going to happen. And that's like, I think that's the benefit too of having like a series in that way, right? So that the world really does feel like a living, breathing place that's evolving. And again, it rewards series readership as well. So you get like, you enjoy the book on its own, but then you get to like enjoy it extra when you've read the whole thing, because that adds so much more to the experience.
And especially as it kept doing it with Leo and Catherine, it was like, well, you were supposed to be in here. Well, you're the one that lost her. I was like, listen, if y'all don't get somewhere and fix this. But yes, I think that was one of the strongest parts because this is a big deal, and romance is built on series, and this is a series done well, beautifully.
Yeah, and this is something we talked about in characters, and I want to highlight it here because I think it's a really important takeaway. Whether you're writing romance, whether you're writing fantasy, whether you're writing crime, like whatever you're writing, right, is to like you make these story decisions and to not just leave them at the surface, right? Where you're like, okay, I have this thing, I have this element, and I have this element, and then now I'm gonna like just do whatever. But like taking advantage of what you have already, right? So like she made the decision to have this really tight knit family with a very specific family culture, with a very specific way of doing and being in the world. And she took that and she used it to actually influence what the story looks like. And I think that it can be really easy to like miss those opportunities, right? Where you like, create a certain kind of family with a certain kind of dynamic. And then you don't think to like kind of push them into the fray with everything to make it a little messier, a little funnier, a little more chaotic, a little more whatever that thing is that that family brings, or that character, or that backstory, or whatever that choice is that you've made, to like invite it to come a little bit more into the story and say like, how does this actually affect the way the events play out? How does this actually impact? So like we do it all the time in world building with fantasy, right? Where it's like, so you chose that you wanted whatever, this type of magic system, for example. And not just letting that example sit on its own, but saying, okay, let's pull on that thread and say, what does that mean? Right? So like, what does it mean for, now this is, this can get too quickly into the nitty gritty. But like, what does that mean for, say, the economics, or what does that mean for the governmental structures? And it's basically taking the choices that you make and pulling them into the story so that they meet, right? So that everything starts to get interwoven and has a meaningful impact on the rest, on the other story choices that you've made. So bringing those choices you've made to bear onto the story itself, the events that unfold and the way that they unfold. It's this point really is about not missing the opportunities you already have. Like you've set yourself up, and to not miss the opportunity to like utilize the setups that you have knowingly or unknowingly given yourself to add that extra bit of momentum, that extra, again, bit of humor or dimension or whatever conflict to the story. And I think she does that so well because the family directly influences the way that this story plays out. They're not just hovering around on the side like we have opinions and we're just out here on the side. They are in it. And that's like half of the fun of the experience.
Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest part too is this they change, but they don't change that much. So meaning like his opinions on them was almost like a non-factor until he realized, okay, this isn't working. Mm-hmm. Where what you've always, is almost like that saying, what got you here won't get you there.
Yeah.
That's what happens, right?
Yeah.
And that's when he started realizing like, okay, what's going on here? And the other thing that I thought was, this is a tiny thing and it's kind of piggybacks on what you said, but I thought that she did really well of sort of like finding ways to really bring in the time, technology, what was going on in the political landscape without it being heavy-handed. You know, the fact that she made him a tinkerer. Made him a tinkerer, like an engineer sort of vibe. And the fact that she was curious because her dad liked things. And it just became this thing that made them similar in the oddest way that had they been in any other environment. He said, I'd seen her several times. And I mean, I just didn't really pay attention. But something about her knowing the things that made her, not a catch for others, it made her the perfect catch for him. And so just using those opportunities, because it also humanized Harry in a way that he needed. Yeah. So that he could be Harry. Yeah. And readers still rock with him. Yeah. You needed both of those. Yeah. You need the things that really connect him to see that like he goes hard for his people. He's going to pay their doctor bills. He's going to do that. But he's also, what else I need to do? I paid you. Right. Yeah. Same man. Same man. And I'm like, it's almost like the thing I always talk about. You just got to be prepared to go there. Mm-hmm. And she did. In some of the moments, it's like, oh my God, are they going to get this right? Y'all going to get this together? And it's like, come on. We're rooting for you. Get it together now and get to the real nitty gritty part. Yeah. So quick question. I'm curious, if you have a writer who's writing a morally gray main male character, would you say that that's a necessary feature of like something that still humanizes them, or something that like gives them some kind of like moral like line, even if it's not the typical like law-abiding citizens moral lines? Like, do you need those kinds of things so that they're not just like Yeah,
so
they're
that they
not
don't
just like
spiral
out
out
there.
into unsympathetic.
Yeah. Normally they have a code they live by, or a
Mm-hmm.
rule they live by, or an
Okay.
ethos, that they
Yeah.
live by. It's kind of like, it's like, we do all this stuff, but no women, no babies,
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
And they're going to do whatever they need to do to stick by that.
Mm-hmm.
Because it just still shows that they sort of have a code of conduct,
Yeah, so they're not like a complete monster.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
completely, right? But that the things are operating, like, even with him, he was like, people owe favors,
Yeah.
Boy was like, if I had to not do anything that could be compromised or whatever, I wouldn't do anything. When Jake Valentine was saying that. So yes, you do want that. You also want some. I think this is where building a morally great character really serves it best, is when you have someone that what led them down that path could have been a very innocent, or life, like them dealing with the card that they was dealt.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you still want them to be relatable.
Yeah.
And then even likable may be sometimes a stretch, but likable still is like that they are willing to see like what happens to them. And so you have to deal with that. And I think a great representation in the books that we've read is if you think of something like Beautifully Cruel,
Mm-hmm.
that he sort of who Lim was, and even who True was.
Mm-hmm.
I was about to say, I was thinking about the movie, who True was, but he was doing it for a very specific reason.
Mm-hmm.
And when we know what that very specific reason is, you're like, you know what? Well,
yeah, you're like, maybe I wouldn't do it, but I kind of don't blame you. But
listen.
And it's kind of like, this isn't exactly the same, because the villain is still the villain in a story. But I think about, when you make a villain, if you don't want them to just be, ambiguous big bad, but want them to be convincing, we want to understand them to some extent, even if we disagree with their ultimate decision making. Now, you're not maybe going quite that far with your morally gray main male character, but it's a similar function of like, okay, I get it. I get it.
Well, yeah,
I wouldn't do it myself, but I get it.
And normally what that is the fact that you maybe wouldn't have reasoned the same way, but they have a reason.
Yes, and you can follow their train of logic.
That's right.
The same way that, again, we take our female main characters and avoid making them annoying. We can follow their train of logic. Just like you said, even if I wouldn't do the same, like end up at the same conclusion, I understand how you got from point A to point B.
Mm-hmm. And I will say about that, and this is probably, and I'm going to say we didn't mention this in the plot, and so I apologize. But I will say this is one of those stories where you really get the effect of the reality that in romance, that your protagonists are both the protagonist and the antagonist.
Mm-hmm.
They are.
Yeah.
Right? Because they both have goals that conflict with each other. And this story is a great showing of that. Like, you have the Michael thing, but you also have them bumping heads because of that. And essentially the fact that the love interest is the antagonist to the other one. And you see that really well in this story. And so that is a great representation of that too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yep.
Were there any other points that we did not hit that you wanted to make sure that we touched on? Any last takeaways you want to make sure people take with them before we wrap our discussion on Tempt Me at Twilight?
I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but this is one of my favorite books.
Oh my gosh, you had that one locked and loaded. You're like, I know exactly. You were ready to deploy that payoff. You were sitting on it, ready to go. You saw that opportunity from a mile away and you were like, oh yes, it's all going according to plan.
Right. No, that's true, but I would say this is probably one of those great books to go back and look at some of our previous books. I would say the one that rises to the surface would be Indigo by Beverly Jenkins.
Mm-hmm.
These are two historical romances that we've read. And looking at the two of them, it's a great, I think it's going to give a better understanding to some of the things that we talk about in this conversation,
Yeah.
because hers have more of a romantic suspense.
Mm-hmm.
The timelines are different, but they're not that far off. Location and,
Yeah.
proximity and all that stuff, like that's all different. But I think that helps you to see some of the things that we're talking about, because
Mm-hmm.
there was a really strong external plot in that story, and it
Yeah.
and it doesn't make one wrong or right. It just makes them different, and it makes them
Yeah.
enjoyable in their own way. And I would say that just makes you realize, like, with some of our picks, it really is great to sort of look at some of the others, especially if you are someone that you want to write, for example, historical romance, right?
Yeah.
Like understanding and taking your time and reading in that niche and deciding for yourself like where you want to fall, even if it's just to work through the process of drafting, because these decisions that we're talking about are the decisions that brands are made of, as we can
Yeah.
see. And
Yeah.
so I would just say, in closing, for me, like, this is just a book that I can read over and over again and enjoy. But at the same time, I would say take it with the thing of like, what are you looking to do? Where are
Yeah.
you looking to grow stronger? Are you looking to see those types of tropes sort of slow down so that you can really look at them? Are you wanting to play with having a morally ambiguous protagonist without going too dark with your storyline? Are you looking to have a story that is um, more integrated so that you have more series read through? This is
Mm-hmm.
what having an integrated sort of cast sort of does for you.
Yeah.
And so those types of things, this definitely can help you along those lines.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is a good example of like why we say what we say all the time, right? Which is like why it's so important to read lots of different books, right? Because if you compare and contrast something like this with like Sin and Chocolate or Sin and Magic, right? And you're looking at two romances, but you're seeing something that's indie, a little bit more modern, right? That's been written in the last 5 to 8 years, I think. It's not old, but it's newer than this book was, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just because then you get the breadth of understanding of what's happening in the landscape. And just like you said, checking out Indigo, because this is a different kind of historical romance, and the way that Beverly Jenkins did it, but also the conversation we had in our comps episode, which, by the way, I highly recommend. That episode rocks, and I send it to my clients all the time where I'm like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
you're looking for comps? Literally watch this episode. Like, this is like where we talk in depth about this. But right, those specific comps, right, for certain problems you're looking to solve or things you're looking to get better at, right? And being able to identify, what am I looking to get better at or work on more intentionally, and what books are doing that really well that I would like to, like, ooh, I'd like to incorporate more of how this person did it, or I want my characters to be stronger or whatever. And that's why that's so important. And so I think this is highlighting that thing that we say pretty much every book, which is reading is really important, and knowing what you're looking for in your books and having those comps are essentials in your writer toolkit.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us for our for our takeaways of Tempt Me at Twilight, but also for our month-long discussion of this novel. I hope that you found it helpful. We're going to be coming at you next month. Or next week, I mean, telling to talk about how did I lose my ability to use words? It just all fell apart there. Woo. We're coming back next week where we will kick off our discussion of Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. So grab your copy, get started reading because it's like 21 hours. So chop, little onion, let's go. And get your reading on so you can join us next week as we go into our overview for Fourth Wing. Until then, you can visit us online at storydeepdive.com. You can find our show notes. You can find out more about Dana or myself. You can also follow us on your preferred podcast platform. If you're on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a like, leave us a rating and review, and a comment, and let us know what questions you have so we can answer those in future episodes. So we will see you back here, same time, same place next week. But until then, as always, happy writing.